Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as a travel agent, and one of the perks is getting decent discounts on flight bookings for family members. My cousin, who's 6'4", often relies on me to book his flights since I know which airlines offer the best legroom options. He's always grateful because being tall on a cramped flight is basically torture. 2 months ago, he needed to fly from Ahmedabad to Kolkata for a business meeting. Being the good cousin I am, I booked him an exit row aisle seat and even paid extra for it. I always do this for him because regular seats are just too uncomfortable for someone his height. The day of the flight arrives, and my cousin calls me, sounding both amused and annoyed. Here's what went down. He boards the plane, walks to his exit row seat, 13C, only to find someone already sitting there. Not just anyone, a woman who would soon prove herself worthy of the title Karen. The entire row is occupied, and it's clear someone's playing musical chairs with the seating assignments. My cousin approached her politely, informing her that she was sitting in his seat. Without even looking up from her phone, Karen dismissed him, claiming she always books aisle seats. When my cousin suggested she might be in the wrong row and asked her to check her boarding pass, she just insisted it was her seat and that he must be confused. She said this with such conviction that you'd think she owned the entire aircraft. My cousin decided to handle this professionally. He showed her his boarding pass with seat 13C and suggested they check with a flight attendant to sort out the confusion. When he returned with the flight attendant, who confirmed it was his seat, my cousin got a brilliant idea. Instead of causing a scene, he decided to play a little game. He told Karen that after speaking with the flight attendant and verifying it was his seat, they had offered him a complimentary upgrade to business class. Karen's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, and when my cousin mentioned that he actually preferred the leg room in the exit row and offered her the upgrade instead, she eagerly accepted. She practically jumped out of the seat, gathering her things with a smug smile when my cousin instructed her to go to the front and tell the attendant she was accepting the business class upgrade for the passenger from 13C. This particular flight didn't have a business class section. My cousin knew this because I had told him while booking. But Karen, in her entitled rush to get a free upgrade, didn't even consider this possibility. She strutted to the front of the plane like she'd won the lottery, only to be met with complete confusion from the flight attendant. A few minutes later, she stormed back and accused my cousin of lying about the business class upgrade, but he just feigned confusion. When she reminded him about telling her to ask for a business class seat, he simply pointed out that he had just arrived at his assigned seat, 13C, showing his boarding pass to the flight attendant, who had followed Karen back. Karen started to stutter, trying to explain why she was sitting there, but her voice trailed off as she realized she'd backed herself into a corner. Another passenger in the row spoke up, confirming they had all witnessed what happened and that it was definitely my cousin's seat. The flight attendant, who had clearly dealt with her share of entitled passengers, stepped in and asked to see Karen's boarding pass. Karen made a big show of searching through her purse, muttering about incompetent staff and poor service. She checked her carry-on, her pockets, and even pretended to look through a non-existent coat. Finally, she found her boarding pass but clutched it like it was made of gold. She began ranting about how often she flew and how she always got aisle seats, claiming this was discrimination. By now, she was causing such a scene that the captain himself came to investigate. The other passengers were getting restless, checking their watches and sighing audibly. The captain demanded to see her boarding pass, threatening that she'd have to leave the aircraft if she didn't comply. When Karen finally handed it over, the captain read it with raised eyebrows and revealed that her actual seat was 22B, 9 rows back and a middle seat. Karen's face went through several shades of red before settling on a deep crimson. She started demanding compensation for this horrible treatment, claiming her status as a frequent flyer. The captain gave her 2 simple options: go to her assigned seat or leave the plane. But Karen wasn't done yet. As she reluctantly gathered her things, she pulled out her phone and started recording, threatening to make the incident go viral and sue everyone involved. The captain, completely unfazed, simply pointed toward her assigned seat and warned her that recording on the aircraft without permission was against their policy. He told her to put her phone away and proceed to her seat, or security would escort her off. Finally realizing she'd lost all leverage, Karen stormed down the aisle, but not before making one final declaration that she'd never fly this airline again, and that they'd be hearing from her lawyer. My cousin settled into his rightful seat, and the other passengers in the row actually applauded quietly. One of them leaned over and whispered his appreciation for the brilliant fake business class upgrade trick. The flight ended up being delayed by almost 30 minutes because of Karen's antics. My cousin later found out from a flight attendant that Karen tried to file a complaint about him at the destination airport, claiming he had harassed her. When they pulled up the flight manifest and security footage, she was issued a warning for seat theft and disruptive behavior, and her frequent flyer status was suspended for 6 months. My life changed when our HOA elected a new president 6 months ago. At first, she seemed normal enough. She talked about maintaining property values and community standards like they all do. But then came the announcement that shocked everyone. Her first major policy change was that all residents, including children, had to wear formal business attire at all times when outside their homes. Suits, ties, formal dresses, the works. The initial announcement came through our community newsletter, and most of us thought it was a joke or maybe just a suggestion for community events. I remember talking to my neighbor over the fence while we were both doing yard work in our regular clothes. I asked him if he could believe they wanted us to wear suits just to mow our lawns. He responded that it had to be a misprint, saying nobody could be that crazy. We were wrong. So very wrong. The first fines started showing up a week later. $100 for wearing jeans to check the mail. $200 for inappropriate attire while walking dogs. People started getting angry, but she just doubled down. The monthly HOA meetings turned into shouting matches. One resident angrily protested about the insanity of making their 6-year-old wear a suit just to play in the yard. Karen coldly replied that if they couldn't maintain proper standards, perhaps this wasn't the neighborhood for them. When another resident pointed out that these rules weren't even legal, Karen smugly told them that she had consulted with their attorneys and they had full authority to maintain community standards. Things got worse when she hired what she called a security company. Really just some sketchy guys in cheap suits who drove around all day taking pictures of violators. But what happened to me last weekend was the final straw. I was loading up my car for a day at the lake with my kids. We were all in swimsuits and cover-ups, obviously, because we were going swimming. That's when she came storming across the street like some deranged formal-wear crusader. She started yelling about how unacceptable our appearance was and demanded to know where our proper clothes were. When I explained we were going to the lake and wearing swimsuits, she insisted that the dress code applied the moment we stepped outside our house and ordered us to change immediately. I told her that was ridiculous and we weren't changing. That's when she made her threat. She told me she had already discussed this with her security team and they would remove all inappropriate clothing from our house themselves if we didn't comply with their standards. I asked her if she was really threatening to break into my house and steal our clothes. She had the audacity to claim it wasn't stealing when it was enforcement of community standards. I'll admit I lost it at that point. I told her exactly where she could shove her community standards, using words I had to later explain to my kids why they shouldn't repeat. We got in the car and left her standing there, red-faced and screeching. We had a great day at the lake, but when we got home around 9 p.m., I knew something was wrong the moment we pulled up. The front door was slightly open and I could see clothes hangers scattered on the lawn. Inside, every closet and dresser had been ransacked. All our non-formal clothes were gone, even my kids' pajamas and my gym clothes. I called the police immediately. While we were waiting for them to arrive, my neighbor came over. He told me he had seen everything. Karen had been there with her hired security guys. They went around back and broke in, then carried out boxes of clothes and loaded them into their van. When I asked if he had gotten any pictures, he said he had done even better. He had video footage and had even recorded Karen giving them instructions. The police arrived, and with the video evidence and multiple witness statements, they moved fast. They arrested Karen that night, still in her formal wear. Under questioning, she gave up her security team. Turns out they were actually known burglars she'd hired through some shady connections. But the story doesn't end there. Those guys had friends who weren't happy about being turned in. 2 nights after the arrests, the whole neighborhood woke up to flames. Karen's house was completely engulfed. The fire department managed to keep it from spreading to other homes, but hers was a total loss. Apparently, her security team had some angry associates on the outside. The police recovered all our stolen clothes from a storage unit. Karen and her burglar friends are facing multiple felony charges. The HOA board has been completely replaced, and the new leadership's first act was to abolish old dress codes. Karen was trying to argue in court that as HOA president, she had the authority to confiscate non-compliant items. The judge apparently laughed out loud. She's looking at 5 to 10 years and civil lawsuits from half the neighborhood. These days, we all make a point of wearing the most casual clothes possible when we're out in our yards, just because we can. I've been in software sales for most of my career, and I've seen all types of characters come and go. But there was this one guy who really took the cake. Let me tell you about how karma finally caught up with him at our annual user conference in Las Vegas. I was still pretty fresh in my career, around 27, and doing pretty well for myself. In sales, especially during these conferences, we had a lot of freedom with expenses as long as they were client-related. Fancy dinners, drinks, club tables, you name it. The only hard rule was no paying for strippers. Simple enough, right? Well, some of the older guys had figured out ways around this rule. They'd talk to strip club managers and get the dancers' tips added to the bottle service bills instead. Pretty sleazy if you ask me. I never played that game. Taking clients to strip clubs just seemed unprofessional. There was this older sales guy, let's call him the sleazeball. He was in his late 40s and embodied everything wrong with the sales stereotype. He'd lie to prospects, overcharge them, promise things our product couldn't deliver. You know the type. The implementation teams hated dealing with his clients because he'd set unrealistic expectations, but he didn't care as long as he got his commission. His wife was ultra-religious, were talking making their kids go to Christian school and church every Sunday religious. She absolutely despised these Vegas trips. The sleazeball would tell us how she made him leave his suitcase in the garage after these trips. She'd wash his clothes separately and then sanitize the washing machine. Pretty extreme, but that's how much she hated Sin City. During the last night of the conference, the sleazeball had arranged for a strip club shuttle and was desperately trying to fill seats to meet the minimum for free entry. I was chatting with a client when he approached us. He tried to convince us to join them on the shuttle. When I declined, he started mocking me, suggesting I was scared of pretty ladies and making crude jokes about how quickly I get excited if one of them touched me. My client looked uncomfortable, and I was getting annoyed. This guy was making fun of me in front of my client for being professional. I told him I didn't want to go because I didn't think it was professional. After he left, I bought my client another round, and we had a good laugh about what a tool the sleazeball was. Later that night, I decided to take a walk down the strip before turning in early for my morning flight. If you've been to Vegas, you know about those people on the sidewalk with escort cards. They're not allowed to speak, so they just stand there slapping the cards against their hands. Usually I ignore them, but after a few drinks I started collecting some of these cards, and an idea started forming. The next morning at the airport, the sleazeball looked like death warmed over. He'd stayed out until around 4 a.m. and was clearly hungover. I was feeling fresh as a daisy and secretly enjoying his misery. At one point, he asked me to watch his bag while he used the bathroom. I agreed with fake friendliness. The moment he disappeared into the bathroom, I pulled out those escort cards I collected and slipped them into different pockets of his bag. Then I sat back and waited. A week later at the office, the sleazeball was looking for sympathy from anyone who would listen. Apparently, his wife found the cards while doing laundry and completely lost it. She didn't believe in divorce, but she had a different solution. She made him attend church 3 times a week and go to marriage counseling with their pastor. He even had to quit his precious weekly golf league. He kept insisting to everyone that he never took those cards and didn't even remember seeing any card guys that night. When a coworker suggested he might have been too drunk to remember, he just groaned about how unfair it all was, complaining about all the extra church activities and missing his golf games. I simply suggested that maybe it was a sign he should focus more on his family. He never suspected me. Every time he complained about his unfair punishment, I just nodded sympathetically while internally celebrating my perfect revenge. He's still doing those extra church sessions, and his wife now has him volunteering at their church's youth group every Saturday morning, right when his old golf league meets. I grew up in a small New England town in the 1960s, where traditions weren't just followed, they were enforced like law. My mother had always encouraged me to question things that didn't make sense, which probably explains why I ended up leading what my classmates later called the Great Pants Rebellion during my junior year of high school. Our school's dress code was something straight out of the Victorian era. Girls had to wear dresses or skirts with blouses, while boys got to wear dress pants and collared shirts. Living in Massachusetts meant dealing with brutal winters. Let me tell you, walking a third of a mile to the bus stop in freezing temperatures, wearing nothing but a skirt, was pure torture. One cold morning, as I stood at the bus stop with snow piling up around my shoes, I watched the boys arriving in their warm pants while my legs felt like they were turning into icicles. That's when I noticed something interesting. My best friend was wearing thick wool leggings under her skirt. I asked her how she wasn't freezing. She explained that she'd been wearing leggings under her skirt and just taking them off at her locker before class. That conversation sparked an idea. After school, I went straight to the library and pulled out our student handbook. I spent hours going through every single rule about the dress code and locker usage. What I found was fascinating. The rules stated that all outdoor weather gear had to be removed at our lockers in the corridor before entering any other rooms. The handbook also listed what qualified as weather gear: coats, boots, warm pants, specifically mentioning corduroy, lined and wool pants, and winter accessories. The next day, I put my plan into action. I wore a pair of my brother's old corduroy pants under my skirt to school. When I got to my locker, I did exactly what the rules said. I removed my weather gear right there in the corridor. Several teachers passing by looked scandalized. Soon enough, I was called to the principal's office. The vice principal was there too. The principal demanded to know what I thought I was doing, saying I couldn't remove clothing in the hallway. I calmly pointed out that, according to the student handbook, all weather gear must be removed at our lockers before entering other rooms, and the handbook specifically listed warm pants as weather gear. The vice principal stammered, trying to tell me that wasn't what the rule meant, and insisted I needed to go to the bathroom to change. I stood my ground, explaining that the rules clearly stated weather gear couldn't be brought into other rooms, and the bathroom was another room. I was simply following the rules exactly as written. The principal called my behavior unacceptable and accused me of disrupting the school environment. I responded by asking if they were suggesting it was better for us to risk frostbite than stay warm while following the dress code. Within a week, 5 other girls had joined my protest. By the end of the month, it was 20. The teachers were getting increasingly frustrated, especially since we were being extremely careful to follow every rule to the letter. Some girls would even help hold up coats around others who were changing to ensure there was no risk of anything inappropriate showing. The breaking point came when one of the teachers tried to give me detention for indecent behavior. I brought my mother to the school board meeting armed with weather reports showing the average winter temperatures, medical articles about frostbite risks, and our student handbook. My mother was a force to be reckoned with in that meeting. She asked them point blank if they were really willing to risk students' health just to maintain an outdated dress code. challenging them to defend their position publicly. When a board member tried to argue that the dress code maintained proper decorum and discipline, my mother shot back by sarcastically asking what exactly hypothermia maintained. The school board tried to compromise by saying we could wear pants only on days when the temperature was below freezing. But once that door was opened, there was no closing it. Girls started wearing pants on rainy spring days too. After all, wet skirts were just as uncomfortable as frozen ones. Finally, after 3 months of what they called administrative disruption, the school board gave in. They amended the dress code to allow girls to wear dress pants year-round. Of course, once that happened, the definition of dress pants got looser and looser until eventually everyone was wearing jeans. During the final school board meeting where they announced the change, I overheard a conversation between the principal and vice principal. The principal admitted they should have just changed the rule when we first brought it up. The vice principal expressed surprise that students would actually read the handbook so carefully. As I walked past them, I couldn't resist commenting that maybe next time they'd think twice before underestimating us. The following year, they completely rewrote the student handbook. I heard they spent extra time making sure there weren't any more loopholes for students to exploit. But it didn't matter. We'd already won our right to wear pants, and there was no going back. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.